Well, tell me that wasn't the strangest thing you've ever seen yesterday. If you saw it. If not, we're going to take you through it this morning on a Wednesday on KCMO 95.7 FM. That was the most bizarre press conference with Jackson County Prosecutor Gene Peters Baker, Mayor Quentin Lucas, and Police Chief Stacey Graves that I'd ever seen on a local level. And we've seen some weird ones in this town. That was as bizarre as it gets. So it was very evident out of the gates that Gene Peters Baker, the Jackson County prosecutor, knew that she had to get in and get out of this press conference yesterday. And what they ended up announcing and what they ended up pointing out is that there are now 2 adults who happen to find themselves in custody who have been charged with murder in connection with the death of Lisa Lopez Galvin following the Chiefs parade. Lindell Mays and Dominic Miller, Mays 23 years old, Miller 18 years old, were charged with second-degree murder as well as 2 counts of unlawful use of a weapon and armed criminal action. Now, to be clear, this is different from the 2 juveniles who were in custody in recent days. There was a misconception that these were the 2 juveniles who were actually adults. No. There are still 2 juveniles. They may end up being charged as adults, and then you have these 2 adults. They're different individuals.
Yeah, key thing to point out here, a lot of, I guess, moving parts, so to speak. It's parallel things going on.
Yeah, there was this big misconception I saw on social media. Oh, I knew they were adults. No. There are 2 juveniles and 2 adults. So these 2 adults were charged yesterday with second-degree murder. But it was the strangest thing as Gene Peters Baker gets up there and preaches transparency, yet no real information was given on the individuals. Birth dates of the adults were redacted, which was kind of odd. No, that was curiously odd. Now, of course, that information came out, but it was kind of odd at the time. There still was no word or no updated information on where the juveniles who were also arrested in the shooting currently are. Have they been released? And then she bolted out of that press conference after only taking a couple of questions. Everyone clear? Nothing to see here. All right, we got 2 adults charged with second-degree murder. Juveniles, all right, don't know where they are, don't know what's going on, or at least she wouldn't share that. And as for questions, I'm not going to take many. She sprinted out of that damn press conference. It was wild. Well, then some digging starts to happen. And I've got to give a lot of credit to a guy over at KSHB. Cameron Taylor is his name. He's an investigative journalist over there. And I may have to drop the Woke 41 moniker because he is doing some outstanding work for that outlet. We find out within the next hour or so of the Gene Peters Baker press conference, which took place at about 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, that one of the men charged in the parade, Lindell Mays, recently got off unsupervised probation earlier this month for pulling out a gun at the Belton Community Center in 2021. The violation at the time displayed a black handgun during a dispute while playing basketball at the Belton Community Center, placing members in fear for their safety and causing other players to run out of the gym. So as Cameron Taylor pointed out for KSHB, what came out of that? Well, unsupervised probation from what took place down there in Belton. And then we also end up finding out here a gun found by Lindell Mays after he had been shot at the parade was a stolen gun, according to court records. Who would have ever believed that that would have possibly been a case? That stolen weapons and somebody who had some kind of criminal history in this region possibly would have been responsible for what took place. Yet yesterday, as Gene Peters Baker was doing this press conference and was, supposedly updating the community on what happened, she cited a potential criminal background for Lindell Mays, but didn't provide any specifics despite, I'm sure full well, knowing about it.
You said your office had no contact with either of the two of them. Have police had contact with them prior to this?
Not that I am aware of. I believe one of them may have had some other incident at a city level, not in Kansas City.
You really think she didn't have any of those details about what was uncovered in Belton? You think that she just happened to forget those little pesky facts? She doesn't want to share any of that information. It's very obvious what's going on here. They're basically trying to run the clock out. And by that, they are hoping that media, especially national media, will quickly forget about this and move on, and they'll get into their 2024 news cycle. And local media will, maybe follow it a little bit, but won't be all over them. And this thing will kind of fade off into the sunset. That's what they are desperately hoping for. The fact that she could not answer that question and say, there was an issue in Belton. Here's what happened at a community center. He was waving a gun. People are fearful for their lives. And yes, there is a history with this individual. She knew full well there was a history with this individual. And she beats around the bush with there might have been an incident. There was no contact with our office, but there might have been an incident at a city level, maybe something, possibly. It's all nonsense. This is about protection. Protection of her office, protection of her friends, protection of whatever credibility she's got left, which as far as I'm concerned is none. That's what this was yesterday. She knew, and the office knew they had to get out in front of this. They had to say something. They had to do something. They were getting crushed. So they got out there. They gave as little information as they could. And then when finally some of the facts started to come out, they're nowhere to be found. And I highly doubt we will see Jean Peters Baker say anything publicly again this week. I'd love to be wrong about that, but something tells me that's not what we are going to see. And that's not what's going to happen here. So now as we sit here on a Wednesday morning and we hear from you at 913-408-7957 on 95.7 FM KCMO, we know that for those who have been screaming about gun laws and gun control and gun this and gun that, you have at least one of these two individuals who had a history with weapons, who also had a stolen weapon on or near him at the time of the parade shooting. Two issues right there that we've got. Someone who already had, broken the law of sorts with a weapon, and somebody who then had a illegal weapon on or near them at the time of the shooting. But yes, the answer is always added laws. Always. And by the way, the way that other people in this town covered that press conference yesterday. Now, Angie Racono, KCTV5, she'll be here at 7:35. She did an outstanding job. I mentioned some of the folks at KSHB doing a very good job. But some of the talking heads just totally embarrassed themselves on this. I was stunned as I was listening to some of this in real time. What people were saying, how they were like, well, Gene says there's nothing to see here, so by golly, I'm going to stick my head in the sand and, move on with my day. Just a scuffle between a couple of folks. Yeah, that's always how it goes, right? Someone made a joke about their mother, and then, all hell breaks loose and people are shooting guns at each other. That's always how it goes. 913-408-7957 as we get a Wednesday morning rolling on KCMO Talk Radio. I told you to hang with me on Monday morning. I really said it Sunday night on Twitter. I said, hang with me here. You're going to get the information this week. Things are going to start coming out, and the narrative is going to be blown to smithereens. And that began yesterday in that press conference, whether people want to admit it or not. That was some show yesterday, man, and I understand many of you were at work, at the office, going on with your day at 2 o'clock when Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker gives the update on what happened at the Super Bowl parade. They've got 2 men charged with second-degree murder. These are two men separate from the two juveniles who have been in custody since late last week. So it's two different people, have nothing to do with the minors. But I also thought it was very interesting when Jean Peters Baker noted here that she couldn't really tell us who is in custody at this point.
Prosecutor Baker, can you kind of clarify for us, are these the juveniles or are those juveniles still in custody and these are adults?
These are adults. There are two juveniles that has been reported already pretty broadly by the news media. Those are being handled by a different office at this point in time.
So notice what she didn't answer there. Where are the two juveniles that were originally arrested? Had they been released? Are they still in custody? Does she get to point the finger and say, well, that's not my office? Well, last we heard, there was a possibility or a likelihood they were going to be charged as adults in this shooting. If so, whatever happened to that? Now, I understand that things can take some time. Like, I get it. The legal system turns very, very slowly. But should this community be thinking about the fact that there are two juveniles potentially out on the streets today who were involved in this Super Bowl shooting? It would seem to me that every law-abiding citizen in Kansas City deserves to know where these two individuals are right now. Okay, they're juveniles. I don't much care. I don't need their names. I don't need mugshots. I don't need anything like that. Tell me where they are. Are they in custody or are they out? And that was Angie Racono's voice from KCTV5 who asked that question. And you can see how Jean completely dodged the answer. I mean, yesterday was one big dodge. That's what it was. While preaching transparency, there were not nearly the amount of facts that you would want to get out of a conversation and a press conference like that. And then this as well from yesterday. I mean, this was just stunning. So this is also Angie Racono asking Jean Peters Baker if the individuals who had been charged yesterday with second-degree murder were part of different groups.
Are the juveniles in different groups as well?
I don't like necessarily the word groups necessarily, but we are clustering people together.
Oh my goodness. And by the way, the documents say groups. You see what she was implying there, right? You see what she was going for. Well, we don't want to say groups because that's an insinuation of potential, gang-related activity. I mean, it's clear what she's implying. We all understand what she's insinuating there. I don't want to say groups. Well, your own documents say groups. It says Group 1 and Group 2 on it. So to then admonish Angie Racono, KCTV5, I don't want to use the phrase groups. I wouldn't want to upset the alleged murderers by saying they're part of different groups. That wouldn't be right now, would it?
Clustering.
Yes, we're clustering individuals. You're not fat. You're just a high-calorie individual. I wouldn't want to hurt your feelings by calling you a fat slob. Your calorie intake's a little high. That's all.
Are the juveniles in different groups as well?
I don't like necessarily the word groups necessarily, but we are clustering people together.
Clustering.
Yes, there are some individuals that are connected with the juveniles in our overall in this overall crime scene. So again, I'm not trying to be vague. I know you want answers, but that's as much as information as we can give in these moments.
Wow.
In the movie Heartbreak Ridge, Clint Eastwood was a gunnery sergeant who had a really popular phrase he used to utter when he didn't like the way things were going and being run. Cluster F-bomb.
Well,
yeah.
As always, Clint Eastwood had it right. One thing we can all agree on. Don't hit the dump button there, Mark. John's not going to say it. Don't worry. He's a pro. But to hear Jean make that kind of comment as she continues to dodge and weave her way around this press conference yesterday. It was very evident that we were going to get the very basic facts that she could provide and very little more. That's what was going to come out of yesterday's press conference, and that's exactly what did. And then eventually, credit to some of the investigative journalists in this town. Listen, I give different people a hard time, but KSHB, I may have to drop the Woke 41 moniker I've used for years. They put up a mugshot of one of the individuals. I was stunned by that because they were one of the folks back in 2020 that said we're not doing mugshots anymore unless it's absolutely necessary. So, and I retweeted that at Pete Mundo last night just because I was kind of like, oh, okay, here's the story, by the way. And KSHB's putting mugshots out there, which I didn't have on my bingo card for the week. And one of their investigative reporters led the way on finding out that Lindell Mays, one of the guys charged with second-degree murder, had a history of gun crimes and also had a stolen gun that was found on him shortly after the shooting took place. So I will absolutely give credit where it's due. But it was stunning as I was also scrolling through social media and popping around different radio shows yesterday afternoon after I was watching the press conference and drove home. And for people to take Jean Peters Baker and that press conference and come to the conclusion, as many did, see, this is just an argument that's spiraling out of control. And that's why we need gun reform or something. What are you talking about? What we have here is somebody who, yes, had a history of weapons usage illegally. And yes, of course, Belton go to Cass County, so you can't put this specific situation on Jean. But you have somebody who was let off too lightly at the municipal level. And then you have somebody who was down at this parade, allegedly, with an illegal weapon to begin with. So for those screaming about new laws, you have multiple laws that were already broken by this individual. Your talking point has gone up in flames the last 18 hours here. So we'll talk plenty more about this throughout the morning here on KCMO Talk Radio. It is great to be here on a Wednesday. It's going to be a balmy Wednesday for February. The whole day was just beyond bizarre watching this press conference by the Jackson County prosecutor. But the strangest moment, besides the just lack of information that existed and came out of yesterday, I mean, yeah, we got the basics, okay? But there was a moment when the prosecutor read a letter that she said was provided to her by the family of Lisa Lopez Galvin, the woman who was killed in the shooting after the parade rally. And this, I mean, goodness gracious, this was as cringe as you can possibly get from the prosecutor, patting herself on the back.
But they did send a statement. I will send this statement out. It's a little bit long. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you now, but we'll send it after today's press conference.
So first off, this is a letter. She said the family couldn't be here, didn't want to be here, whatever it might be. So they sent in this letter they wanted me to read to you. Now, how often does the family of a deceased individual show up to a press conference with a prosecutor? Is that a regular thing? I mean, maybe it's happened once in a blue moon, but I don't think anybody was at that press conference looking or wanting to talk to the family. The family's not doing the investigation. I mean, everyone's very sympathetic and empathetic for the family, and we have ways you can help the Lisa Lopez Galvin family on our website at kcmotalkradio.com. There's a fundraising link there. But yesterday wasn't about the empathy for the family. Yesterday was about what are you as prosecutors, as law enforcement, as the leaders in this town doing to keep people safe from these criminals? And who are they? And what's the story? And what have you been up to for the last week? That's what this was about. No one was at that press conference expecting to hear from the family of Lisa Lopez Galvin, with all due respect. This was about you and your investigation. And she goes off in this weird couple of minutes about how, the family couldn't be here and they did want to send their regards and they wrote this letter, and I'm going to read this letter to you. And here's the letter that Jean Peters Baker read, patting herself on the back.
So that you have their statement. On behalf of the Lopez Galvin family, we are grateful to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, led by Jean Peters Baker and her amazing team of highly experienced and dedicated prosecutors.
Oh, my gosh.
We also want to thank the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department.
Oh, my goodness. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Yeah, let me read you this letter here that nobody asked for. And, the letter talks about how great I am. Wow. Jeez. Woo. How about that? Jean's waking up with a sore back today after patting herself on the back so much reading that letter about how great she is. Dropped in the third person, by the way. The amazing team of Jean Peters Baker and her investigative folks there at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. My goodness. Do you have no shame? This town and this city's gone to hell in a handbasket in this county because of your failure of leadership. And in one of the biggest moments in this city's history, in what I would say is the biggest press conference of your political life, you waste 2 minutes of our time getting up there and patting yourself on the back. Oh, yeah. Oh, what a great job our team's doing. Which no one asked for. No one was there. And I say that with all due respect to the family. Nobody was there to hear from them in that moment. They were there for an update on the investigation of the people involved in this shooting. That's what it was about. But never let a crisis go to waste. 913-408-7957 at 7:55 on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. It was just, oh, gosh. I literally almost threw up in my mouth when that part of this 20-minute press conference took place yesterday. I couldn't believe it. Now, meantime, something else that needs to be noted here. Stacey Graves put out a statement yesterday. She was there at the press conference, and the police chief, here's the thing. Police chief and the mayor, and we'll get to some what the mayor said coming up, but the police chief and the mayor were kind of innocent bystanders in this press conference yesterday. But I do think the police chief has to be a little careful going forward. And what I mean by that is the statement put out by Police Chief Graves yesterday reads as follows. Almost immediately after Wednesday's shootings happened at Union Station, our investigators determined Dominic Miller, an adult, and Lindell Mays, an adult, were two of the shooters. So hold on. They had that information on Wednesday, and here we are on Tuesday. I mean, we're here on Wednesday, but yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, is when the prosecutor decided to announce these charges 6 days after the fact. That's kind of strange, is it not? So she admits that right after the shootings, almost immediately, they had two of these adult shooters and took 6 days for the prosecutor to tell us who they are. Next line here from the police chief. I'm grateful that the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office has charged Miller and Mays with murder and other felonies as consequences of their reckless actions. The prosecutor's office has my full confidence in the handling of prosecution of this case. Full confidence? I know that you got to play nice. I get the politics of having a unified front. I do. It's important for the mayor to have the unified front with the police chief and the prosecutor. But there's a fine line between having a unified front and, I don't want to use the word lying because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but no one who spent 5 minutes in law enforcement in this town has the full confidence in this prosecutor's office. And, I'll speak broadly here, but no one in law enforcement in this town has full confidence in Gene Peters Baker. So playing nice, I get the politics of it. But let's not take it to the point where we're saying we've got the full confidence of the prosecutor's office here to do their job, because they haven't done their damn job in years. 913-408-7957. I will play some of the comments from the mayor yesterday. We'll do that right after the news on 95.7 FM KCMO. So the press conference yesterday from the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office was, listen, the big story that came out of it, of course, was two men charged with second-degree murder. Lyndell Mays, Dominic Miller. Still don't know where the two juveniles are from last week. She would not answer that question. The mayor was flanking the prosecutor along with the police chief, and they were there, it seemed like mostly in solidarity. The mayor and the police chief didn't ask any questions yesterday or answer any questions. That was done exclusively by the prosecutor, as it should have been. But the mayor did speak. Quentin Lucas did address the media yesterday, and here is what he had to say.
I'll say very briefly that lawlessness and criminality will never be tolerated in Kansas City. From the beginning of the incident on Wednesday, Chief...
Now, how do you feel about that? I'll continue. But how do you feel about that?
I'll say very briefly that lawlessness and criminality will never be tolerated in Kansas City. From the beginning of the incident on Wednesday, Chief Graves, her officers, our command staff, and others were working nonstop to make sure that we could find the assailants, to make sure that there would be persons brought to justice as swiftly as possible. Jackson County Prosecutor Gene Peters Baker, her assistant prosecutors, and her entire staff worked closely and collaboratively with the Kansas City Police Department, our federal partners, and all who had information about the incidents that lead us to this position now. We recognize that for the people of Kansas City to feel safe, for us to deter criminal activity and to ensure valid and appropriate punishment, consequences must be swift, certain, and severe. What you have seen over the last week is folks working from the prosecutor's office, from the police department, and beyond to make sure that we would have that swiftness of an investigation and a thorough investigation, that you would have certainty, that they went through incredible amounts of review to make sure we got to the right charges, and to make sure that today we would see the appropriate charges that could be aligned with appropriate punishments thereafter.
That was Quentin Lucas yesterday at this press conference. Lawlessness will never be tolerated in Kansas City. You know, we had the mayor on last Thursday, the day after the shooting, of course, in his usual 7:30 slot, which he's been doing, and we appreciate, for the better part of 4 years here on KCMO. And I thought he was measured. I thought he was contrite. Now, I think he's obviously made some mistakes since then in some of what he said in media, like when he went on another radio show and said the governor was dog whistling by calling these individuals thugs. I mean, that's what they are by the definition of the word. But I thought he was very good on this show last week. He apologized to Kansas City. And if yesterday, there's two ways to look at what the mayor just said there. Lawlessness will not be tolerated in Kansas City. The one way to look at it is to scoff and say that's a bunch of BS. Lawlessness has been tolerated in this town for several years, and it's only gotten worse under the leadership of this prosecutor, who, you ask any cop in this town, they arrest the same people over and over and over again, and they're back out on the streets. The second way to look at this, if you want to be an optimist, and I prefer to be an optimist. I do. I want to believe in the goodness of people. The second way to look at this is that maybe this finally was a tipping point. Now, you'd think 183 homicides last year was enough of a tipping point, setting a record for Kansas City, Missouri. But for whatever reason, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe this was. Because of how big of a black eye this is for this town and how embarrassing it is for the people in charge. I have said for a very long time that if you're actually talking about the increase in crime in this city, you can't put it all at the feet of Mayor Lucas. You can't. Now, you can blame him for things. You can be fairly critical of things that he has done during his tenure. But you can't sit there like I saw Tommy Loren of Outkick and Fox did something on, he wanted to defund the police, and look what happens. I mean, it's not that direct of an A to B. It's not. But the best thing that Quentin Lucas could do here, publicly and privately, is to hold this prosecutor's feet to the fire on this case and deliver the wake-up call that she desperately needs. If you've listened to our conversations, you know I've asked him about this prosecutor's office for a very long time, on and off, ad nauseum. And for the most part, he has said, like it or not, that he more or less stands by her. If there's one thing that I've said on this show that I would beg him to do, it's to use his bully pulpit to pressure her, to get her to be tougher on criminals. Now, maybe this is it. I'm not suggesting it is. I'm not saying I have a lot of confidence it is. I wouldn't go to Vegas today or run to the Kansas side of the state line and place a bet on DraftKings.
I would caution you if you were.
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I'm not doing that, and I'm not going to do it. But I would not mind, in a perfect world, for that to be a positive outcome from all this. Not going to do it. 913-408-7957. But I do sit here and say, if we want to find some kind of positive that comes out of this, it's that you throw the book at everybody involved from last week. Not just these two adults, by the way, but the juveniles. And I'm telling you, there's something going on with these juveniles that we don't know. Yesterday, Jean Peters Baker was asked whether or not the two juveniles we've been hearing about for the last several days were in custody, and she was totally evasive in her answer.
Prosecutor Baker, can you kind of clarify for us, are these the juveniles, or are those juveniles still in custody, and these are adults?
These are adults. There are two juveniles that has been reported already pretty broadly by the news media. Those are being handled by a different office at this point in time.
Didn't answer the question. Didn't say, and she knows the answer. She could provide that, I'm sure. We don't need to know who they are. They're juveniles, fine. Don't need to know their names, but whatever. I just want to know whether or not they're in custody today in this town. Or if two juveniles who were arrested and within 24 hours were charged, and we heard we're going to eventually be charged as adults, whether or not they're in custody today, or if they're out on the streets in Kansas City, Missouri. I would think that Kansas City residents should be demanding to know that right now. Have every right to know that right now. And she can't answer the question. She dodged it. And she said, well, that's being handled by somebody else, And that's the consistent theme with this office. Dodge, deflect, point fingers, and use media allies to further the narrative that she has. But I firmly believe that a wake-up call is happening. I talked to many people, publicly and privately, who were at that press conference yesterday, and they are fed up. I don't want to say they carried her water, but they certainly gave her a break for far too long. They gave the office a break for far too long, and they're finally opening their eyes to what has been going on in that prosecutor's office for years that we've been telling you about here on KCMO Talk Radio. And if this is their tipping point, I guess all I can say to that is better late than never. 913-408-7957. We will get to your calls coming up here on KCMO. And also, one of you just sent me this on the text line, that the family of one of the shooting suspects has set up a GoFundMe. Are you kidding me? I will share that story with you next on KCMO 95.7 FM and stream us on the KCMO Talk Radio app. There's embarrassment and lack of self-awareness, and then there's this. The mother of Lindell Mace, 23-year-old man charged yesterday with second-degree murder in the wake of the shooting at the Chiefs Super Bowl parade, set up a GoFundMe for him. I kid you not.
I'm getting pissed now.
Tennille Burnside created the online fundraiser, reading this here in the New York Post, for her son, showing him lying in a hospital bed recovering from 9 bullet wounds from the shootout he allegedly confessed to starting. The since deleted GoFundMe page read, he is in the ICU fighting for a recovery from several surgeries from going to the Chiefs Super Bowl celebration with his older sister. My goodness. Do you have no shame? It adds here, getting shot multiple times at a time that was meant to bring so much joy to so many has brought pain and sadness to all those that were attending. But I digress. This guy was charged with second-degree murder. Prosecutors say he's the one who first brandished his weapon that started this gunfight that resulted in the death of Lisa Lopez Galvin and several children between the ages of 6 and 16 getting injured. Those kids will never be the same. And the mother of one of these thugs, by definition of the word, all right, the guy's a thug, has the audacity to try to fundraise for herself and her family off of this.
It plays well in Hollywood, unfortunately.
Wow. I've seen a lot. I never thought I'd see this. The audacity to raise money for your child who was just charged, your kid who was just charged with second-degree murder and started a gunfight that led to 24 people getting shot, one person getting killed, a dozen kids. That is just next level stupidity, arrogance, absurdity, and a bunch of other words I can't say on the air right now. I will share this story on my Facebook and Twitter page. You can see them there. That is something else. 913-408-7957. Daryl is on KCMO first up. What's up, Daryl? Good morning.
Hey, Pete. Congratulations on your new baby when it gets here.
Thanks, buddy. 38 weeks. Hey. Here we go.
Yeah, all right. So, hey, I got a little information for for Lucas down there. He needs to put his big boy panties on and fire her. Get rid of her. Find somebody that's going to do a job right and take care of the law. Mm-hmm. Each one of them, they should have filed attempted murder charges at each kid that he shot. I mean, she could do so much better. And I'm a mayor up here, but, the common sense down there has just pretty well shipped out the window.
Well, Daryl, he can't. Listen, if he could, I would love for him to do it. He can't fire the prosecutor since she's elected by the people. So, right. But here's the good news, Daryl. The good news is that Jean Peters Baker is going away. She is not running for re-election in Jackson County. And if you rewind to 2020, when everyone's talking about, Trump and Biden, and we're talking about local issues here on KCMO. I mean, don't get me wrong. We did the two old guys. But I remember saying so many times on the air in 2020, the most important election in this region was not the 3rd District, Amanda Atkins and Sharice Davids. It wasn't that. It wasn't any other congressional race. It wasn't a U.S. Senate race, Roger Marshall. The biggest race in the region that would have the greatest impact on this community, on this region, was the Jackson County prosecutor's race. I said it time and time again. And I think the last few years and the crime that we've seen the last few years in this town have only proven that to be true. And Jean won re-election then. Thankfully, she's going away. But as we oftentimes can say in politics, be careful what you wish for. I'm not sure it can get much worse, but it can potentially get worse. And I know, I know there's a couple of Democrats who have filed right now. I think there's a couple of Republicans who are going to, at least one who's going to get into the race as well. But listen, right now, this has got to be stripped of the DNR. I want to hear and see the backgrounds of individuals because, frankly, Is a Republican prosecutor going to win in Jackson County, Missouri? Maybe people are finally fed up, but I have a hard time seeing that. If you can find me a left-of-center Democrat who is tough on crime, who is willing to knock the current administration, that may be the best bet to come out with a much better situation in Jackson County. And trust me, we'll do more on this as we roll right along here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. The text line 913-408-7957. A lot of you pointing out the absurdity of that GoFundMe. Some people genuinely have no shame, none whatsoever. Ryan's in Kansas City. What's up, Ryan? Good morning.
Hey, Pete, what's up, man? Good morning. Hey, man, good job by Angie Racono this morning. And then like yesterday as well. But is she going to have to go on air to make a public apology for blowing a dog whistle, calling them groups, or what kind of Lee had to do with their Catterday episode?
Yeah. Well, Ryan. I love the tongue-in-cheek, and you're right, by the way. For those that missed it, Angie Racono, KCTV5, was on the show this morning. She was at the press conference yesterday with Gene Peters-Baker, and Gene Peters-Baker kind of admonished her in this exchange. Take a listen.
Are the juveniles in different groups as well?
I don't like necessarily the word groups necessarily, but we are clustering people.
And you can hear Angie say there, it's in your documentation. The court documents refer to them as groups. How obnoxious is that? Well, I don't want to refer to them as groups. What word do you want to use? Clusters? Like, what's the word that would make you feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside? I wouldn't want to use the word groups. Well, your documentation calls them groups. Gene? Do you read your own crap? I mean, do you literally do any of your own homework? She also couldn't say anything about, the backgrounds of these individuals.
You said your office had no contact with either of the two of them. Have police had contact with them prior to this?
Not that I am aware of. I believe one of them may have had some other incident at a city level, not in Kansas City.
Well, it turns out that Lindell Mays displayed a handgun during a dispute playing basketball at the Belton Community Center and just finished 2 years of unsupervised probation. You're telling me she didn't know that going into the press conference yesterday? Please. She absolutely knew that. But she wanted to make the media find it on their own. She didn't want to hand it to them on a silver platter. That's what was going on there. I mean, what a joke. She was like Floyd Mayweather in the ring yesterday. Dodge, deflect, just counterpunch if needed. That's all it was. It wasn't fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee. It was just fly like a butterfly and get the hell out of there as quickly as I can.